Story number 1. Whispers in the Snow. I've always been a loner, finding solace in the quiet isolation that only the Alaskan wilderness can offer. The vast expanse of snow-covered landscapes, the endless night sky dotted with stars, and the crisp, biting air were my companions on that fateful Christmas night in December 1996. My name is Alex Thompson, and what was meant to be a peaceful holiday spent alone at my family's remote cabin turned into a nightmare that still haunts my every waking moment. The decision to spend Christmas alone wasn't born out of necessity, but rather a deep-seated desire for solitude. My parents lived in Anchorage, a bustling city far removed from the serene beauty of our ancestral home in the untouched wilderness. After a particularly stressful year, I sought refuge in the silence and stillness of the Alaskan winter, hoping to find clarity and peace away from the chaos of everyday life. The cabin, nestled deep within the pristine wilderness, was everything I needed: secluded, warm, and imbued with the comforting scent of pine and aged wood. As I arrived on December 24th, the snow was already falling heavily, blanketing the world in a thick layer of white. I set up camp quickly, the routine of unpacking and settling in providing a sense of normalcy amidst the impending darkness. That first night was serene. I sat by the fireplace, sipping hot cocoa and watching the flames dance, the shadows they cast flickering across the room. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional crackle of the fire and the soft patter of snow against the windows. I felt a deep sense of contentment, the kind that comes from being truly alone yet entirely at peace. But as midnight approached, the tranquility began to shift. The wind outside grew stronger, howling through the trees with an intensity that seemed almost sentient. The temperature dropped sharply, and I pulled my blanket tighter around me, feeling the chill seep into my bones. That's when I first heard it, a faint whisper, barely audible over the storm's fury. At first, I dismissed it as the wind playing tricks on my mind, but the whispers persisted, growing slightly louder and more distinct with each passing minute. It sounded like someone calling my name, a soft, mournful plea that sent shivers down my spine. My heart raced as I strained to listen, the whispers weaving through the howling wind like ethereal threads of sorrow. "Alex, Alex." I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, the isolation amplifying every sound into something more sinister. Yet, the whispers continued, persistent and haunting. I glanced around the cabin, eyes darting to every corner, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist, playing tricks on my weary mind. As the clock struck midnight, the whispers reached a crescendo, their sorrowful tone now unmistakable. Compelled by a mix of fear and curiosity, I stood up and approached the window, the cold air nipping at my skin. Peering out into the blinding snowfall, I scanned the surrounding wilderness, the vastness of the landscape making it impossible to pinpoint the source of the whispers. That's when I saw her, a figure standing motionless in the middle of the snowfield, just beyond the reach of my flashlight's beam. She was dressed in a flowing white gown, her hair cascading down her shoulders like strands of pure ice. Her presence was both beautiful and terrifying, an apparition born from the very heart of the winter storm. As I watched, transfixed by her ethereal beauty, she began to move slowly toward the cabin, her steps silent against the thick snow. My breath caught in my throat as she drew closer, her hollow eyes locked onto mine, piercing through the darkness with an intensity that made my skin crawl. The air around her seemed to shimmer, a spectral glow emanating from her very being. "Alex," her voice echoed, a haunting melody that resonated deep within me. "Come to me." Panic surged through my veins, and I stumbled backward, knocking over a chair in my haste to retreat. My mind raced, grappling with the impossibility of what I was witnessing. Was this some twisted manifestation of my own fears? Or was there something truly supernatural at play? I grabbed my coat and dashed outside, the cold assaulting me as I ran toward the apparition. The snow swirled around me, the storm's fury intensifying as if nature itself was conspiring against me. Each step felt heavy, my legs moving on autopilot driven by an unrelenting force. The whispers followed me, their mournful pleas growing louder, guiding me deeper into the heart of the storm. As I trudged through the knee-deep snow, the figure remained a constant presence, her white gown glowing against the darkened landscape. Her eyes never wavered, a beacon of sorrow and longing that pulled me further away from the safety of the cabin. My breath came in ragged gasps, the cold biting at my face, but I couldn't stop. It was as if her voice had taken control of my very being, compelling me to follow. Suddenly, the ground beneath me began to tremble, the snow shifting and swirling with unnatural force. The whispers transformed into anguished cries, a chorus of lost souls echoing through the storm. The figure reached out her hand, her fingers elongated and delicate, beckoning me to come closer. Fear and desperation battled within me, but the pull was too strong to resist. In the distance, the snowstorm intensified, the winds howling like the wails of the damned. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the landscape in stark, fleeting bursts of white light. The figure's form became more defined, her presence more tangible, as if the boundary between the living and the dead was blurring before my eyes. "Alex, please help me." Her voice broke, tears of frost glistening on her cheeks as the winds carried her sorrowful plea. The realization hit me like a freight train. She was a lost soul, trapped in this eternal winter, seeking salvation. My heart ached with empathy, the weight of her despair heavy on my shoulders. I reached out a trembling hand, desperate to offer comfort. But the moment my fingers brushed against hers, a jolt of icy energy surged through me, sending me sprawling to the ground. The storm raged around me, the howling wind now a cacophony of despair and rage. The figure stood over me, her eyes filled with a sorrow that transcended time. "You must help me find peace," she implored, her voice a haunting echo that reverberated through my very soul. Summoning every ounce of strength, I struggled to my feet, determined to fulfill her desperate plea. "What can I do? How can I help you?" Her spectral form began to fade, the snow swirling around her like a shroud. "Find the truth. Uncover my story. Release me from this eternal winter." With those final words, she vanished into the storm, leaving me alone in the blinding snow, the echoes of her sorrow lingering in the air. Exhausted and shaken, I made my way back to the cabin, the weight of responsibility pressing down on me. The storm showed no signs of abating, the snow continuing to fall in relentless sheets, covering the world in a blanket of white. The next morning, the storm had subsided, leaving behind a serene but haunting stillness. The cabin stood silent, the only evidence of the night's horrors the overturned chair and the deep crevices in the snow where the footprints had been. I packed up my gear, the memory of the ghostly apparition burning into my mind, and vowed never to return to that cursed place. As I drove away from the cabin, the sun began to rise, casting a golden glow over the snow-covered landscape. But the peace was illusory, the echoes of that night still haunting my dreams. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had left something behind, a part of me intertwined with the sorrow of a lost soul searching for redemption. Years have passed since that terrifying Christmas night, but the memory remains vivid, a constant reminder of the thin veil between our world and the spirits that linger in the shadows. Sometimes, when the winter winds howl just right and the snow begins to fall, I swear I can hear her whispers carried on the breeze, a haunting melody that calls out to me from the depths of the frozen wilderness, forever entwining my fate with hers. And as the years go by, I find myself wondering if I will ever truly find peace, or if the echoes of that cursed night will forever bind me to the eternal winter that claimed my family's home and the restless spirit of a woman lost to time. Story number 2. Whispers at the Weihnachtsmarkt. I've always cherished the vibrant energy of Berlin's Weihnachtsmarkt, the Christmas market that transformed the city into a winter wonderland every December. The scent of mulled wine and roasted chestnuts mingled with the crisp winter air, creating an atmosphere of festive cheer that was irresistible. In December 2002, my wife, Anna, and I decided to immerse ourselves in the magic of the season, wandering through the labyrinth of stalls that lined the bustling streets. Our favorite stall was nestled in a quieter corner of the market, far from the throngs of tourists and the blaring Christmas tunes. It was an antique shop, its wooden facade adorned with twinkling lights and garlands of evergreens. The window display featured a collection of old ornaments, delicate glass baubles, and intricately carved wooden figures that seemed to whisper stories of bygone eras. I was always fascinated by the history each piece held, imagining the hands that had crafted them and the homes they had adorned over the years. One chilly evening, as the first snowflakes began to fall, we found ourselves drawn to a particularly old-looking stall that we hadn't noticed before. The sign above the entrance read simply, "Antiquitaten," in elegant script. Curious, we approached, the warmth emanating from within a stark contrast to the biting cold outside. The stall was cluttered with an eclectic mix of items: vintage toys, faded photographs, and antique jewelry, but one object stood out: a beautifully ornate Christmas tree ornament, intricately designed with delicate patterns that shimmered under the soft glow of the stall's lighting. Behind the counter stood an elderly man, his presence almost spectral. His skin was unnaturally pale, his eyes sunken and lifeless, giving him an almost otherworldly appearance. He wore a tattered coat that seemed to have seen better days, and his hands, though steady, bore the marks of age and wear. When Anna and I approached to inquire about the ornament, he didn't respond. Instead, he fixed us with an intense, unblinking stare that sent a chill down my spine. "Excuse me," Anna began, her voice wavering slightly. "Can you tell us about this ornament? It's quite beautiful." The man remained silent, his gaze unwavering. I felt an unsettling sense of unease, as if his stare was probing into the depths of my soul. Anna, sensing my discomfort, decided to make the purchase. "We'll take it," she said softly, reaching for her wallet. As Anna handed over the money, the man's eyes seemed to darken, and a faint smile played on his lips, something so subtle it was almost imperceptible. We thanked him and turned to leave, the warmth of the stall feeling heavier, almost oppressive. Once outside, we paused for a moment, trying to shake off the eerie feeling that had settled over us. "That was strange," I remarked, glancing back at the stall. Anna nodded, clutching the ornament tightly. "Yeah, but it's a beautiful piece. Let's put it up on the tree." That night, as we decorated our Christmas tree, the ornament found its place among the other baubles. Its intricate design seemed to shimmer with an inner light, casting delicate patterns across the room. We admired it for a while, unaware of the darkness that was about to descend upon us. The following day, we decided to visit the stall again, hoping to learn more about the ornament and perhaps uncover the story behind its mysterious seller. To our surprise, the Antiquitaten stall was nowhere to be found. We wandered the market, asking around, but no one seemed to remember the old stall or the pale man we had encountered. It was as if it had vanished into thin air. Perplexed but undeterred, we decided to explore the area where the stall had been, hoping to find some clue or explanation. The snow had fallen heavily overnight, covering the ground in a thick blanket of white. As we approached the spot, a sense of foreboding settled over us. The area was eerily quiet, the usual sounds of the market muffled by the heavy snowfall. Suddenly, we heard it, a faint knocking sound, rhythmic and deliberate, emanating from beneath the snow. My heart raced as I turned to Anna. "Do you hear that?" She nodded, her eyes wide with fear. "It's coming from over there," she whispered, pointing toward the edge of the forest that bordered the market. Against my better judgment, I followed the sound, Anna close behind. The knocking grew louder, more insistent, as we ventured deeper into the forest. The trees loomed overhead, their branches heavy with snow, creating a canopy that blocked out the moonlight and cast long, twisted shadows on the ground. As we pushed forward, the atmosphere became increasingly oppressive. The cold seemed to seep into my bones, and the knocking now sounded almost like desperate pleas. We reached a small clearing, the source of the sound now unmistakable. There, half buried in the snow, was an old wooden chest, its surface cracked and weathered by time. The knocking was coming from within, with a mixture of fear and curiosity. I approached the chest. "Should we open it?" I asked Anna, my voice barely above a whisper. She hesitated, her hand trembling as she reached out to touch mine. "I don't know. Feels wrong." But the knocking grew louder, more urgent, as if the contents were trying to escape. Taking a deep breath, I lifted the lid, revealing a collection of old Christmas ornaments, similar to the one we had purchased, but worn and faded with age. Among them was a single, pristine ornament, identical to ours, gleaming under the faint light filtering through the trees. As I reached out to touch it, a gust of wind swept through the clearing, and the temperature plummeted further. The once lifeless eyes of the old man seemed to materialize in the shadows, his face twisted in sorrow and rage. His voice, cold and hollow, echoed through the clearing. "Why did you take what was not yours?" Anna screamed, pulling me away from the chest. The spirit of the old man began to manifest, his ghostly form standing before us, eyes burning with a spectral fire. "Return what you have taken," he demanded, his voice reverberating through the trees. Terrified, we stumbled back, the spirits of the forest surrounding us. The once serene beauty of the Christmas market had transformed into a nightmare of ghostly apparitions and relentless curses. The old man reached out, his fingers icy and ethereal, as the spirits closed in, their mournful wails filling the air. Desperate to escape, we turned and ran, the sounds of the forest chasing us through the night. The knocking, now a cacophony of despair, seemed to follow us, the spirits determined to reclaim what was theirs. We didn't stop until we reached the safety of the town, our breaths ragged and hearts pounding with fear. In the days that followed, the memory of that night haunted us. The ornament we had brought home remained on our tree, a constant reminder of the spirits that lingered in the shadows. We consulted with local historians and paranormal experts, learning that the forest had indeed been the site of a tragic massacre in the early 20th century. The old man was believed to be the spirit of a wronged craftsman, his soul bound to protect the sanctity of the forest and its ancient traditions. Determined to make amends, we returned to the forest, this time with offerings of respect and forgiveness. We found the chest once more and carefully returned the ornaments, including the one we had taken. As we placed each piece back, the oppressive atmosphere began to lift, the spirit's anger giving way to a sense of peace. The old man's apparition appeared once more, his expression softened. "Thank you," he whispered before fading into the night, the snow gently settling around us in a final gesture of closure. We left the forest with a profound sense of relief, the haunting memories now tempered by the knowledge that we had righted our wrongs. The Christmas market returned to its usual festive charm, the shadows of the past finally laid to rest. But every December, as the snow begins to fall and the market lights twinkle once more, I can't help but feel a lingering presence, a reminder of the night when the spirits of the Weihnachtsmarkt reached out to us, teaching us the true meaning of respect and remembrance. Years have passed since that fateful Christmas, but the story of the cursed stall and the vengeful spirit remains a chilling reminder of the thin line between tradition and tragedy. And as I gaze upon the ornaments that adorn our tree, I remember the whispers of the past, echoing through the snow-covered streets of Berlin, forever intertwined with the magic and mystery of the holiday season. Story number 3. The Curse of the Christmas Tree. I've always been enchanted by the traditions that bind families together, the warmth of shared moments, and the magic that fills the air during the holiday season. Growing up in a grand manor in the English countryside, Christmas was the pinnacle of our year, The highlight was always the towering Christmas tree that stood proudly in our ornate drawing room, adorned with countless ornaments and twinkling lights that cast a festive glow across the room. But in 1907, our beloved tradition took a dark and sinister turn, forever altering the way I view the holidays. Our family, the Harringtons, were well respected in society, known for our opulent gatherings and impeccable taste. When my parents decided to bring home a magnificent Christmas tree from a remote and revered forest, excitement filled the manor. The forest was considered sacred by the local villagers, believed to be inhabited by spirits that protected the land. Ignoring the cautious whispers of the villagers, my father, Lord Edward Harrington, insisted that the tree would be the centerpiece of our grand celebration. The journey to the forest was arduous, the winter landscape a stark contrast to the vibrant life of the manor. We hired a team of skilled lumberjacks, and together, we trekked through thick snowdrifts and dense, whispering pines to find the perfect tree. The selected tree was enormous, its branches sprawling like the arms of an ancient guardian. There was something almost otherworldly about its presence, a silent majesty that commanded respect and awe. Back at the manor, setting up the tree was a laborious process. Each ornament was carefully placed, every light meticulously arranged to highlight the tree's natural beauty. As night fell and the first star of Christmas Eve appeared in the sky, the tree was finally complete. The room was bathed in a warm, golden light, the air filled with the scent of pine and the joyous sounds of holiday music. But the festivities that year were overshadowed by an unsettling tension that I couldn't quite place. It began subtly, flickering lights and the faint sound of footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. My parents dismissed these occurrences as the manor settling or the sounds of the storm raging outside. But my sister, Eleanor, and I felt an unshakable sense of unease. The first clear sign that something was terribly wrong came on Christmas Eve, the night when the tree was to be the focal point of our celebration. As we gathered in the drawing room, the air grew inexplicably colder, the lights dimming as if a shadow had been cast over the room. We tried to ignore the chill, attributing it to the winter weather, but the unease deepened with each passing moment. As midnight approached, the manor seemed to come alive with whispers and soft murmurs that filled the air. The flickering lights danced erratically, casting eerie shadows that moved independently of their sources. I glanced around nervously, my heart pounding in my chest. That's when I saw her, a figure clad in a flowing red dress, her hair as white as snow, standing motionless beside the Christmas tree. Her presence was both mesmerizing and terrifying, her hollow eyes staring directly into mine. Eleanor gasped, clutching my arm tightly. "Did you see that?" she whispered, her voice trembling with fear. Before I could respond, the figure began to move, her steps silent yet deliberate as she circled the tree. Her gaze never wavered, and a deep sorrow seemed to emanate from her very being. As she passed by the edge of the tree, the ornaments began to shimmer unnaturally, the lights flickering in sync with her mournful presence. Terrified, I reached for Eleanor, but she pulled away, her eyes wide with panic. "We need to leave," she insisted, her voice barely above a whisper. But before we could make a move, the temperature dropped further. The room plunged into near-total darkness as the lights went out completely. The only illumination came from the faint, ghostly glow of the figure by the tree. The whispers grew louder, now accompanied by the sound of distant crying that seemed to echo from the very walls of the manor. Desperate to restore light, my father attempted to relight the candles, but each flame was snuffed out by an unseen force. The atmosphere grew oppressive, the weight of the sorrow and anger palpable in the air. The figure raised her hands, her voice a haunting melody that resonated through the room. "Leave, before the curse binds you forever." With a surge of adrenaline, my mother grabbed our hands, and we fled the drawing room, the doors slamming shut behind us as if pushed by an invisible hand. We raced through the manor, the sounds of the haunted tree following us, whispers turning into screams, footsteps growing louder and more frantic. The corridors seemed to twist and elongate, trapping us in a labyrinth of fear. We finally found refuge in the library, the heavy wooden doors closing shut with a resounding thud. Exhausted and trembling, we huddled together, the sounds of the cursed tree still echoing in the distance. My mother tried to calm us, but her own fear was evident, her eyes haunted by the night's events. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a serene but eerie calm. The manor stood silent, the Christmas tree now beautifully decorated once more, its lights steady and warm. We tried to rationalize the previous night's horrors as a collective nightmare, the stress of the journey and the isolation taking their toll on our minds. But deep down, we knew something was amiss. Days turned into weeks, and the strange phenomena persisted. Objects continued to move on their own. Lights flickered sporadically, and the sound of footsteps echoed through the empty halls. My parents, once dismissive of the signs, grew increasingly worried, their concern mirrored in the local priest, Father Thomas, who was called to bless the manor. Father Thomas was a stern but kind man, respected by the villagers for his unwavering faith and dedication. Upon hearing our story, he investigated the history of the manor and the sacred forest from which the Christmas tree had been taken. He revealed a chilling truth. The tree had been cut from a part of the forest revered by the local villagers, believed to be inhabited by the spirits of those who had perished in the Great War. The tree, he explained, was more than just a decoration. It was a symbol of remembrance and a conduit for the spirits to honor the fallen. The ritual of blessing the tree had been a long-standing tradition, a way to ensure peace and protection for the manor. By bringing the tree into our home without performing the proper rites, my father had inadvertently angered the spirits, cursing our family with their restless sorrow and lingering vengeance. Determined to lift the curse, Father Thomas guided us through a sacred ceremony, honoring the spirits and seeking their forgiveness. We returned to the forest, the cursed tree now replaced with an appropriate ceremonial tree, and performed the rites as instructed. The air grew warmer, the oppressive cold lifting as the spirits seemed to acknowledge our repentance. That night, the manor was filled with a peaceful silence, the haunted whispers replaced by a serene stillness. The ghostly figure of the woman in red appeared one final time, her expression softened with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered before fading into the night, her presence no longer a source of fear but a reminder of the importance of respect and remembrance. The curse was lifted, and our family found solace in the resolution of the haunting. The Christmas tree remained a beloved tradition, now blessed and respected as it had been intended. The manor returned to its former glory, the strange phenomena ceasing as if the spirits had finally found peace. Years have passed since that fateful Christmas, but the memory of the curse and the lessons learned remain etched in my heart. The traditions that once brought joy now carry a deeper meaning, a reminder of the delicate balance between honoring the past and living in the present. And every December, as the lights twinkle on our Christmas tree, I remember the night when the spirits of the forest reached out to us, teaching us the true essence of the holiday season. Story number 4. Whispers of the Frozen Woods. I've always been drawn to the enigmatic allure of the wilderness, the kind that promises both solace and secrets hidden beneath its pristine veneer. So, when my friends and I, Tom, Lisa, Karen, and I, decided to embark on a skiing trip to the remote forests of northern Sweden in December 1975, it felt like the perfect escape from our hectic lives in Chicago. Little did we know, the frozen woods held a darkness that would forever change our lives. We arrived in Kiruna on a frigid November evening, the town barely lit under the heavy snowfall. The locals were welcoming but reserved, their eyes hinting at stories best left untold. Our destination was a secluded cabin nestled deep within the Scandinavian wilderness, a place promised to offer unparalleled solitude and untouched beauty. The journey from Kiruna was arduous, the winding roads disappearing into endless white landscapes that seemed to stretch into eternity. The first day was everything we had hoped for, We skied through untouched trails, the snow crunching under our boots, the cold air invigorating our spirits. The cabin, though modest, was cozy, a perfect haven against the biting winter chill. We spent our evenings by the fire, sharing stories and laughter, the warmth of the flames creating a stark contrast to the icy world outside. But as night fell on our second day, an uneasy tension began to settle over us. The wind howled outside, a relentless force that seemed to echo the silent fears brewing within. It was around midnight when the first whispers began. At first, they were barely audible, soft, indistinct murmurs that seemed to come from the very walls of the cabin. Tom brushed it off as the wind playing tricks on our minds. But the unease only deepened. The following night, the whispers grew louder, more distinct. We sat around the fire, the shadows dancing ominously on the walls, when Lisa suddenly stiffened, her eyes wide with fear. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The others nodded, their expressions mirroring her distress. It was then that we noticed the footprints, small, circular imprints appearing around the cabin. Despite the snow outside being untouched, they were unlike any animal tracks we had seen, human-like but unnaturally round and perfectly symmetrical. My heart raced as I realized we were not alone. The local legends spoke of the Skogsvakter, the forest guardians, spirits of those who had perished in the woods during the wars, forever bound to protect their sacred ground. Determined to uncover the truth, we decided to investigate. Armed with flashlights and our dwindling courage, we ventured into the forest, following the trail of footprints that led deeper into the heart of the woods. The snowstorm that had been brewing since our arrival had intensified, the wind now a violent tempest that seemed intent on driving us back. Hours passed, the darkness pressing in around us like a suffocating blanket. The whispers now morphed into mournful cries, echoing through the trees with an otherworldly resonance. Just as hope began to wane, we stumbled upon an old, abandoned campsite, a grim reminder of past tragedies. The remnants of tents lay scattered, half buried in snow, and the air was thick with the scent of decay and sorrow. In the center of the campsite stood a solitary figure, cloaked in tattered garments that blended seamlessly with the snow. Her presence was both ethereal and terrifying, her hollow eyes gazing into nothingness. As we approached, she raised a hand, pointing toward the mountain range that loomed ominously in the distance. Without warning, she vanished, leaving behind only the howling wind and a lingering sense of dread. Panic set in as the snowstorm reached its peak, the wind now a cacophony of despair and anger. We raced back to the cabin, the footprints trailing behind us like ghostly fingers guiding us through the storm. The journey was a blur of fear and adrenaline, the forest seemingly alive with malevolent intent. Upon reaching the cabin, we found it transformed. The interior was encased in ice, our belongings frozen solid, the fire reduced to brittle, shattered ice sculptures. The oppressive cold was unbearable, our breaths visible in the frigid air as we struggled to find warmth. The whispers had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that screamed louder than any sound. Desperate to survive, we decided to stay the night, huddling together for warmth as the storm raged outside. But peace was fleeting. In the dead of night, the door was ripped from its hinges, slamming against the walls with a force that shattered the silence. The room plunged into darkness, the only light coming from the flickering ice formations that cast haunting shadows around us. Suddenly, the cabin seemed to come alive with spectral apparitions, ghostly figures of those who had met their demise in these cursed woods. Their mournful wails filled the air, a symphony of sorrow and rage that echoed through the icy chamber. We were surrounded, trapped in a nightmare where the past refused to stay buried. In a last-ditch effort to break the curse, I remembered the legends we had dismissed earlier. The forest guardians sought justice, a way to release their eternal torment. Gathering every ounce of courage, I stepped forward, addressing the spirits with a voice barely above a whisper. "We mean no harm. We seek only to honor your memory and find peace. The air grew colder still, the spirits pausing as if contemplating my words. Slowly, the apparitions began to dissipate, their forms melting into the ice that held the cabin in a frozen embrace. The oppressive cold lifted, replaced by a fragile warmth that seeped into our bones. The storm outside began to subside, the howling wind turning into a gentle breeze that carried away the lingering sorrow. Exhausted and traumatized, we spent the next few days recovering, the cabin slowly thawing as the curse began to lift. The footprints had vanished, and the forest returned to its silent vigil, the spirits of the past finally finding the peace they had long sought. We left Evergreen Springs with a heavy heart, the memory of that harrowing winter etched into our souls. The legends of the Skogsvakter were no longer just stories. They were a testament to the enduring spirits that guarded the sacred ground. We never returned to those cursed woods, but the whispers of the past continue to haunt my dreams. A chilling reminder of the night we encountered the restless souls of the frozen forest. Years have passed since that fateful winter, but the scars remain. Sometimes, when the wind howls just right and the snow begins to fall, I catch a glimpse of a spectral figure watching from the shadows, her eyes hollow and filled with eternal sorrow. The forest guardians stand as a grim reminder that some places are better left undisturbed, their secrets buried beneath layers of snow and time. And as I gaze into the winter landscape, I can't help but wonder if the spirits of Evergreen Springs still watch over the woods, ensuring that their tragic stories are never forgotten, and that their eternal winter remains undisturbed by the hands of time. Story number 5. Whispers of the Red Dresser. I've always believed that every town has its secrets, buried beneath layers of time and snow. Growing up in the small town of Evergreen Springs, Pennsylvania, I never thought those secrets would come knocking on my own doorstep. But in 1983, as the festive season approached, the whispers in the walls of our family bakery turned into screams that I couldn't ignore. Our bakery, Merry Delights, was the heart of Evergreen Springs. For decades, my grandparents had crafted the most exquisite Christmas cakes, pastries, and cookies that drew people from neighboring towns. The aroma of cinnamon, nutmeg, and freshly baked bread filled the air, creating an inviting warmth that contrasted sharply with the biting winter cold outside. December was our busiest month, a time when the streets buzzed with holiday cheer and our ovens worked overtime to meet the demand. But that year, something was different. It started subtly. Late one evening, as I was preparing a batch of gingerbread men, I heard faint whispers echoing through the bakery. At first, I dismissed them as the wind howling outside or the creaking of the old building settling into the cold night. However, as the nights grew longer and the snow piled higher, the whispers became more persistent, more deliberate. "Help me." I'd catch snippets of conversation when I glanced toward the back room, where my parents managed the bulk of the baking while my sister, Anna, and I handled the front counter. The whispers seemed to seep from the walls themselves, weaving through the air like invisible threads of sorrow. Objects began to move on their own, shelves shifting, flour bags sliding across countertops, and, most unnervingly, decorations rearranging themselves overnight. One particularly frigid December night, as the clock struck midnight, I was alone in the bakery. The festive lights cast long, dancing shadows that flickered across the walls. I was meticulously icing a batch of sugar cookies when I heard it, a distinct knocking sound coming from the front of the store. My heart raced as I approached the window, peering out into the darkness. The snowfall had intensified, blanketing the town in a thick layer of white. Through the blur of snowflakes, I saw it, a shadowy figure standing near the entrance. It was tall, draped in an old-fashioned red dress that seemed out of place in the modern bakery. Her hair was long and unkempt, cascading down her back like strands of dark ice. Most chilling of all were her eyes, hollow voids that seemed to stare right through me. Filled with an unspoken anguish, frozen in fear, I watched as she raised a hand and pointed towards the back of the store. Before I could react, she dissolved into the snowstorm, leaving behind only a lingering sense of despair. Shaken, I backed away, my mind racing to make sense of what I just witnessed. Gathering my courage, I ventured toward the back room, the whispers growing louder, guiding me like an unseen force. The back room had always been a source of comfort, a place where my parents experimented with new recipes and shared stories of the bakery's storied past. But tonight felt different. The air was thick with an icy chill, and the once vibrant decorations now seemed oppressive, laden with sorrow. As I entered, the whispers crescendoed into mournful wails. The room was in disarray, flour splattered across countertops, mixers left running unattended, and, most disturbingly, a large, ornate mirror hanging on the far wall. My reflection stared back at me, but it was distorted, twisted by the ice that had formed around its edges. Suddenly, the temperature dropped further, and I felt a presence behind me. Turning slowly, I saw her again, the woman in the red dress, her eyes burning with a desperate plea. "Help me," she whispered, her voice echoing through the room. "Find peace." Before I could respond, a flash of memory pierced through my mind. Images of a woman in a red dress, her face contorted in fear, running through the snow with a crying child. The memory was vivid, as if I had lived it myself, though I had never heard of this tragedy. Desperate for answers, I turned to the dusty bookshelves lining the back wall. Pulling out an old ledger, I began to read about the bakery's history. My heart sank as I uncovered a chilling tale from December 1924. The original owner, a woman named Eliza Redmond, had been a beloved figure in Evergreen Springs. Her bakery was renowned for its festive treats and warm hospitality. But one winter night, tragedy struck. Eliza and her young daughter were found dead in the bakery, victims of a brutal and inexplicable attack. The town was never the same, and rumors of Eliza's restless spirit haunted the premises ever since. The realization hit me hard. We were living in the shadow of that unsolved mystery. Eliza's spirit, bound by sorrow and anger, was reaching out, trying to convey a message that had been lost to time. Determined to help her find peace, I knew I had to uncover the truth behind her untimely death. Over the next few weeks, I delved deeper into the old records and spoke with the town's elderly residents, piecing together fragments of the past. What I discovered was a web of deceit and betrayal that had been carefully concealed. Eliza had been preparing for a grand Christmas celebration, one that would bring joy to the town after a particularly harsh winter. But tensions ran high, and jealousy brewed among those who felt overshadowed by her success. On the night of the massacre, a group of disgruntled individuals had stormed the bakery, their motives a mix of envy and resentment. The exact reason for their violence remained unclear, but it was evident that Eliza's death was a culmination of long-standing grudges and hidden animosities. Armed with this knowledge, I returned to the bakery one final time, determined to confront the spirit and lay her to rest. On Christmas Eve, the night of the original tragedy, I set up a makeshift altar in the back room, adorned with Eliza's favorite pastries and a single red rose, symbolic of her beloved daughter. As midnight approached, the whispers began anew, but this time, they were softer, more hopeful. Eliza's apparition appeared once more, her presence less menacing and more serene. "You've found the truth," she whispered, her eyes no longer hollow but filled with gratitude. "Thank you." A warm light enveloped the room, melting the ice that had formed around the mirror and dispersing the cold that had gripped the bakery for so long. Eliza and her daughter's spirits seemed to dissolve into the light. Their anguish finally lifted, the oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a sense of peace that had been absent for nearly a century. From that night on, Merry Delights returned to its former glory. The whispers ceased, the objects stopped moving, and the bakery once again became a place of joy and festivity. The townspeople noticed the change. their belief in the supernatural strengthened by our ordeal. Years have passed since that unforgettable Christmas. But the memory of Eliza Redmond and the haunted whispers of the bakery remain etched in my mind. Sometimes, when the winter winds howl just right and the aroma of freshly baked goods fills the air, I feel a presence, a gentle reminder that some spirits linger not out of malice, but out of love and the desire for closure. The story of Merry Delights serves as a testament to the enduring power of forgiveness and understanding. Eliza's spirit, once tormented by unresolved sorrow, found peace through compassion and the uncovering of long-buried truths. And as the snow continues to fall each December, blanketing Evergreen Springs in a serene white, the bakery stands as a beacon of hope and remembrance, a place where the past is honored and the future is embraced with open hearts.